Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bleu Podcast by Bleu Creative, where we dive deep into the currents of culture, conversation, and creativity. I'm your host, Tabitha Brown. Today, we have a special guest, Natalie O'Connor from the Art Loft by NCO Creative. We'll be discussing her fascinating journey and some of her incredible adventures. So let's get into it. So, Natalie, how did you become connected to the world of Cuban art?
So as a child and through college, I was interested in the legal field and the arts. I was pursuing legal and still, interacting with different art opportunities. So I worked for a gallery while I was in school studying poli-sci. And I used my paralegal experience with major law firms that I worked at to create legal documents. And given that my mother is Cuban, I started traveling to Cuba later to see family. And so I've always loved working with art and artists, and I professionalized it with the legal, background. But I decided to focus on Cuban art, actually after a conversation with the curator of the World Bank. So the World Bank has a collection of 6,000 works from all over the world. And the idea is to help lift up artists from developing regions to help with the economy and to give them a spotlight. So I loved that. It didn't feel like I was just selling art to match somebody's couch, which, don't get me wrong, I do that too. But I prefer to work with artists that just need a voice. And given that I'm of Cuban descent and I have the access, I was going there. I go to Basel every year. I go to the biennials over there when I can. I support them. I bring them supplies and I network. So I have more access to Cuban artists because of being of Cuban descent.
Mm-hmm.
But I do also work with artists of other regions. I just think that artists from lesser developed countries are able to really hone in on their craft, making them a little bit stronger in those areas. So,
what are some key responsibilities and challenges typically faced by Cuban art consultants in their profession?
There are many different situations that I need to consider that I don't know that everyone that works with Cuban artists has to deal with because I'm very hands-on. My artists are like my family. So I will get them supplies. I have to sometimes help connect them to find vendors within their own country because they're scarce and people are leaving the country or they don't have materials or they have, they work on island time, but it's not just that. There are many factors. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have clients that maybe want to make certain offers and you have to be sensitive to the situation, knowing that they need to feed their family, but you cannot devalue their work. So that becomes a little bit sensitive as well. But, getting the materials is always a task and transporting works. So not everybody can just hop over there, buy the art, come back. You cannot transfer money from U.S. institutions to Cuba.
I didn't know that.
So no, you can't even access your banks or Zelle or Venmo through your phone while you're in Cuba.
Wow. So you've had to create processes and ways to get this stuff done.
Yes, I'm a transporter, a bank, a negotiator, a printer, a carrier.
So your law background makes a lot of sense for what you have to do too, probably navigating some really challenging socio-political things, traveling back and forth too.
Yes. I have family there and I have permission to travel and I have American friends that go there for educational purposes. That's not an issue. And I know my rights and I know what offices to go to for certain permissions to take artworks out. So everything that I do is by the books, but it's a hassle and you have to pay for it in cash. So even unless you're prepared to go to Cuba because you want to buy a certain artwork and you know how much it costs and you're taking that much money to go buy it, you're probably not going to do that. I mean, you probably are going there for a nice time and then you decide you want something and how do you buy it? And how does the artist get it to you? And how do they trust you? And so by working with an American LLC that can facilitate that, I only need 50% of the artwork for them to release it to me because they know and trust me. And then once I bring it to this country, then I get the remaining balance and I ship, and I'm an American company. So if God forbid something went wrong, you contact me. Mm-hmm. But, it's not so easy to do that when you're dealing with someone abroad. So I create kind of an easy system between the two.
So what was your most challenging kind of trip? Was it like the first time you ever went? This is uncharted territory. I have no idea what's going to happen. Or Like, what was the time where you were like, gosh, I'm glad that this worked out?
I was informed of a biennial that was not the official, that was going to be done by the artist, and it was going to be great. And I'm like, okay, still an art fair. And one of my artists that hadn't painted in years, I found him and I met him casually in the streets asking for directions. And he hadn't painted in 3 years. So I brought him art supplies and he started painting and he was fantastic. He'd won awards. He was just working on homes and he stopped. Well, he had a beautiful home by the water and we decided to turn it into a gallery downstairs and to be involved in this art fair for the artists. And I noticed that I was using my branding and promoting it even more than the artists that were promoting it on the island. And they immediately contacted me and they wanted to do the opening event for the entire art fair at that space. And my friend was, working on the walls and I brought all the lighting systems and everything. And it was challenging because, yes, I brought like 50 light bulbs in a suitcase because it was part of a sculpture that he had previously won an award for, but he didn't have the light bulbs. And they were confiscated at the airport because I wasn't supposed to bring in these bulbs. So my light bulbs were confiscated. I never got my property back, even upon my return. But that's fine. I knew that was going to happen. But I was notified by a close friend of mine that worked with the official biennials. And he said that some of the artists were doing some political artworks. In other words, anyone that was involved in this show that we were putting together would be arrested if they move forward with it. Wow. And to stop immediately. So I never work on anything political when I'm anywhere.
Okay.
So we immediately shut it down. I ended up selling artworks here from that show, but we had to close it down after we had just built a gallery and a beautiful show with catalogs and bios and so much translation work and everything that I did on my own beautifully. We did it well, but once again, we did not want to risk the lives of any of the artists. I did not want to be prevented from entering the country. Did not want to offend anybody. Mm-hmm. And then the artists that were, trying to get us to do this larger event were kind of not really being transparent with me. And I think that's the key part, is that transparency is everything, and not getting involved in something that you don't fully understand, I think is important, to be respectful of any country and culture. And then, you let the person decide, this is what's going on. Do you want to be involved? But building a gallery, getting light bulbs confiscated, and then being told that if we're involved, people would get arrested. That's the last thing that I wanted. So we pulled out on that one.
Well, it seems after that, right?
Afterwards, I sold works to a collector. We still got the visibility we wanted later, but not for the wrong reasons.
Nice.
And so that's something that one needs to be sensitive about as well when they're in another country. Mm-hmm. Right?
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Making it work.
Thank you.
So what is your gallery's mission? First, what's your gallery called? What's your gallery's mission? And how does it contribute to the promotion and preservation of Cuban art?
I established my company as NCO Creative in 2016. So I've been doing freelance work. And then I started the actual space, the gallery, the Art Loft, just last year in Old Town, Alexandria. And it's to further the mission that I've already been on about, providing a platform for deserving artists from lesser developed regions and giving access to my clients to something, unique, something interesting, different, as sound investment as well. So the idea is I do use the term gallery, though I try to avoid it because I prefer for it to be more of a cultural space. Mm-hmm. I don't like the idea of just having artworks on the wall. I like people to connect with the artists, the culture, the theme of the exhibition, because some people just haven't had the access, right? So I like to involve music. I bring in live performances. I've shown a documentary by one of my artists. I bring in some food, and sometimes there's dancing or there's workshops. I've had acting workshops. Whatever I can do to help somebody further connect with the artist, the artwork at a deeper level. Mm. The DMV is not really known to be a big contemporary art scene like New York or areas in South Florida, California. And so I would like to help further the contemporary art scene here. And even if you look within the museums, Cuban art is actually very scarce. Just because of the embargo and access. So, it's just something that I would like to do is to leave a little bit of a legacy, to do something meaningful in this area. And so even though a lot of my artists are known in other countries, that there are in other museums, some in New York, Texas, a few states, they're not exactly known in this area. So my goal is to offer them that opportunity.
This is so inspiring. Like just kind of thinking like, wow, you're in this space, you're inviting people in, you know what I mean? Just the whole kind of idea, the theme of you building this community in Cuba and then extending that to the same kind of vibe in your community space, right? We won't call it a gallery. We won't do that. It's a community space. I love that, especially the idea of bringing people in for another purpose, but immersing them in that kind of atmosphere. That's really cool.
Thank you.
What you're doing is super cool.
Thanks.
How does your gallery educate collectors and the public about Cuban art and its significance?
I usually print out information or have a QR code that people can take home, and it gives the background of the current exhibition. They can look up a lot of the artists, and their scholars have written about them. Some have been published in the Wall Street Journal and books. So I try to provide that information to my guests at the events. I try to do the workshops. I would like to start even having live painting courses, but with a famous artist, not just something silly, but someone actually teaching a simplified version of
this is not
what
paint
they
and
do.
sip.
This is not sip and paint. Yeah. Yeah. I would like something more refined. I've also over the years made friends with a lot of wonderful curators in the area. So I would like to eventually incorporate, some talks as well by those curators.
So what role does your gallery play in supporting Cuban artists and fostering a community of enthusiasts?
Once again, the work is primarily focused on Cuban art, but because of my work at the World Bank and my friends from other countries, I do bring in artists from other regions. Specifically, I worked with excellent Lebanese artists recently in the gallery. I work with the #1 muralist in Amman, Jordan, an excellent Jamaican artist in Baltimore, and others as well. But the idea is to have a unique space for events where people can come and connect with individuals that they might not normally interact with on a regular basis. So because of the legal background, because of my work at the World Bank, because of, even working in restaurant industry with different individuals, I bring in characters that would normally not be in the same environment. So I'm merging professional with the arts. A lot of government contracting people can meet with artists from the Kennedy Center and, performers from the Washington Ballet. I've had them all connected events, and always, at a professional level. And at the end of the events, people always tell me how they love, they name off like 5 people that they wouldn't normally interact with. And I think I like the idea of having something different to do. I've never been a person that wants to go to the same events, look at this, have the same conversations, always be with the same friends, always eat at the same place, drink at the same place. So the idea is to kind of also give somebody, a unique experience, right?
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun, especially in DC when I think one of my culture shock things in moving to this area was like the government is here, you know what I mean? It's a little pretentious sometimes. And so to be able to have like a community space like that, to be able to interact with people, kind of with your suit and your pants, like they don't have the impact in the room, right? People are really looking at connecting emotionally, not with just the art, but other people in the room. Why are you here? What intrigued you to come to this event? I want to be invited to one of these events.
I would love
just
to have
saying.
You. I would love to have you. No, it's cool because I find that if you care to meet people while you're there, which you don't have to, you can just listen to the music and look at the art, hang out with me. But if you decide to speak to people at my events, you might notice that, some people are in various positions within the same field, or like I said, completely different, but they'll find a lot of mutual connections. I don't keep bad people around me. And so a lot of them are my friends and I like them for certain reasons. And when I see them connecting for those same reasons, I find it interesting. I like it.
What unique benefits do collectors gain from investing in Cuban art, both personally and as a part of the broader art collective?
I mean, I could start with the obvious. There is an embargo right now. And I think once it's lifted, everybody will have more access to everything that's Cuban, right? So if you look at artist CVs, Cuban art, especially when you're going over there, is not priced at the same rate as it is in this market, which you can say about other countries. So I think upon the initial acquisition, as long as the artist is still involved in activities, I think that personally, in my humble opinion, it's already a sound investment. So you're getting it at a lesser cost than an artist that is more known in this market, though they might be better and more tenured just in other countries. You're having access to something that not everybody has in their home. I think that if you really want to talk about collecting, you should consider artists that are developed or developing their reputation in other regions. And by investing in them and buying out a show or, maybe supporting an exhibition or two and promotions for them in the States, you can increase the value of the works that you purchase.
And I think it also kind of harkens back to, I don't want to do the same things over and over again with the same stuff, especially if you have access to these artists who are making incredible art, impactful art, having like that special like kind of fingerprint or identity like in that artwork, Why would you want something that everybody else has?
Exactly. Well, and to kind of expand on that, I offer works for everyone. I can bring in a $150,000 artwork for a serious collector or museum, sculptures for $60,000 to go in a city square. But I make limited edition prints that are maybe 300 signed by the artist. And so anyone can just take it home, feel it in their home. And then later, if they save up, they have the money, they fall in love with the artist and they can buy the originals. But I want to work with everybody. And, not everyone wants to do, some people do prints, some don't. Everyone works differently. But I like to offer a broad price range too, so that it is accessible to everyone.
What's your favorite print or like original? Probably original, right?
By my artist?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm allowed to talk about that. Well, I can say that somebody that has been doing very well in the DC area is Ciro Quintana. He has kind of a comic style in his works. He's been around since the 80s. He has original pieces in Museo de Bellas Artes. I have some large originals that I recently exhibited. I was surprised that his works were so popular here because they're a little bit out there and bright colored and they're fun. And, this is a conservative area. So I wasn't sure how he would do, but people appreciate these different characters that he puts in his works. And given that I offer them also as prints, they don't have to commit to a huge piece for their living room, though a lot of them still want it. Yeah. I think that by offering occasional commission works and prints, kind of makes it more flexible for the buyer.
How does your gallery support Cuban artists financially, creatively, and professionally? And what impact does the support have on their careers?
Well, so basically, I've really only had the gallery for a short period of time. So it's really me, self-funded. I'm working on grants and I'm looking for people that are interested in getting more involved. But I have purchased and just donated materials, or artists that need materials can order them through me and I bring them over because sometimes it's a matter of giving them that access. For the younger artists, and I say younger, but they've still won awards and they're known over there and through social media and other galleries abroad, sometimes they want help with pricing. And I help them price their works appropriately. Sometimes they need help with various negotiations with other clients. I create all of our own legal agreements. So I help professionalize their work. For the more established artists, I help them with some of those things if they just need, updates on that. But also, once again, I give them the platform here that maybe they haven't had yet in this area, as established as they may be. It's a new region that is respected with many intellectuals that are worldly. So I'm kind of giving them a voice in a more conservative area of the DMV.
So when we first started chatting, you told me that you were doing law and then you went over to art. It's starting to make sense. It's so funny when we think we are going to start in one place and we end up on the way other side of that. But what I think is really amazing about you is that you figured out how to hone these skills that you had prior to diving into the art world and making them work for people who otherwise would not have access to that knowledge, to that time, to the ability to support and be kind of like an avenue for them outside of, you know, their local area or where, you know, in Cuba, right? I never would think that right and left brain would be that close together. But I think what you've been able to do with it is absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
So I have one more question for you.
Sure.
And that is, what artists come to mind that you really love and why?
I've always loved works by Salvador Dali when I was younger, and Frida Kahlo, but I really love Dali. I found his works to be very interesting as someone that also studied some psychology. It's just the inner workings of this person's brain. I find that very fascinating. And so I think I've always gravitated towards the interpretation of a tormented soul's diary, right? And maybe initially my palette was towards the paintings, right? So Dali and some Frida and whatnot. But later, as my palette for wine did, as your palette for anything would, the more exposure you have, it develops a little bit differently. And so I loved, you know, paintings on canvas that were interesting. But later, I started getting a little bit more into conceptual works. And so these are works that someone might look at and say, I could do that. You know, that's very simple. And I think that sometimes quietly to myself. But, you know, most recently, I really fell for the works of Ernesto Rancaño, and he passed away very recently, unfortunately. I met him. He was a close friend of some of my artists. They used to do work together. I met him on a couple of occasions. Just very cool guy. But he has beautiful works that are of different mediums and that are beautiful but also very intense. And you know, if you were to look him up, you'd see a range of sculpture and photography and drawing and some nude women with hooks and feathers and funky stuff. But one of the most simple objects that I liked was a double-sided pencil with 2 erasers. So he did this whole series on objects that once, if you kind of made them mirror themselves, they were no longer useful. So this double-sided pencil can't write. It has 2 erasers. And we could dig further into that, but it was on it has type print saying it was the letter that I never wrote you.
Oh, wow.
And so it seems so simple, but just intense and crazy and awesome. And he thought of it first and he found the way to execute it. And he has a whole series of stuff like this. And so I just think that I like works that make you think, that motivate you in some way, whether you like them or not. If they evoke some sort of emotion from you, I think that's a strong piece and I respect the artist for it. And so I may work with his friends and family to see if I can do something with him here. We had spoken of that years ago, but he's somebody that I very much respected his work and, you know, wish he were still with us, but he has some beautiful pieces.
So you have a room full of, I want to be an art curator. I want to go and I want to get into my community, or I want to pick a niche and I want to go there. What's the first piece of advice that you give?
Be humble. Because I've been doing this for maybe 15 years and I don't buy all of the artworks outright. I develop relationships with everybody. They respect me and they trust me when they hand me their artworks that I will take care of them and that I'm responsible for them at that time. And they are valuable. It takes years to do that. So there's certain things that you need to consider. So you have to develop an eye to know what is quality art and what is shit. Honestly, you actually need to study it and see who's promoting them, who's acknowledging them, why are they skilled, what level are they at. You need to know to not showcase certain level of artists with the most established, unless there's a specific theme and the most established are okay with exhibiting with the younger artists. But normally you need to stick with artists at the same level. And so you kind of need to know the range. So it doesn't happen overnight. You have to develop relationships and you have to understand how to look at their resume and their technique to determine if they're actually a strong artist or not. Most of the time in their field, you'll know they'll have won awards, they'll have exhibited in certain key places. But with time, you can, figure it out and you'll understand who is respected within that community.
You can pick one favorite thing about everything that you do. What is it?
Meeting the artist. Meeting the crazy artist that pisses me off, that I have to help out with something, that yells at me because of whatever. Like, I like people. And so for me, it's an honor to work with their pieces. But I like the characters.
Okay.
I like my circus.
So thank you. This has been an incredible and insightful and inspiring. I can't wait to see what you do with the Art Loft by NCO Creative. Natalie, please tell us where we can find you, where we can see you, all of those things.
So I currently heavy on social media. So Instagram, Facebook, my website, www.ncocreative.com. I do curate Cuban art trips. You can call me, email me, and I can give you more information about everything. The collection process, I can show you samples of the artists that I work with and kind of walk you through it. You don't need to know what you're doing. You can just say, hey, I like art. What do you do? This is my price range. Help me figure it out. Here are my walls. And I provide those services as a consultancy.
Okay.
So,
well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the episode of the Bleu Podcast. I want to thank our amazing guest, Natalie O'Connor, for sharing her inspiring journey and adventures with us today. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We like those. You can also follow us on social media at Bleu Wave Creative for updates and more great content. Until next time, keep riding the wave of creativity and stay curious. I'm Tabitha Brown, and I'm out.